Hello, my friends. Welcome back to another edition of the Artist Forge Live. My name is Nicole York. I will be your host. And with me today is the beautiful and talented and wonderful Princess of the Goblins, Becca Bjorgi. The rest of our crew is either working or off at Portrait Masters this week. So it is just going to be the two of us making madness happen. So we're glad you are here with us. If you're joining us today, comment and let us know who is here so we can say hi. And find out how everybody's doing. Becca, how are you?
I'm chilling. I'm on a roll today. It's the first full day of kindergarten.
Ooh.
So
It's been so quiet in the house.
It's very quiet, and I managed to do a lot of stuff because I don't have someone demanding my attention, and I'm pretty stoked on it.
Nice. Yes. So hang on, this is really bright. I'm just gonna turn that down a little bit. So do you feel the first tastes of freedom?
Yeah. I the focus is the big one. Like it feels so messed up to say like it's freedom, but I mean it kind of is, like that freedom to actually be purposefully attentive.
Mm-hmm.
So
Whoops. I don't think it's messed up at all. I think that's just an honesty that all parents, you get to a place, particularly if you are the stay-at-home parent, where you have the time that's yours again. And while your kiddos are toddlers and babies, you don't get that. So
true that. I mean, it's like we're not supposed to talk about it, right? I feel like maybe it's a little more kosher in the last couple of years, but it's you don't have to exist only as parent, and I think it's worth being candid about that. That you value your autonomy, and I think it's a good model to set for your kids too. Like you don't have to be locked into something.
No, I agree. And it's also important for our kids to know that while we center them and we care for them and everything is there, we are full and whole people as well, because so many parents lose themselves in the act of parenting. And then when your kiddo is old enough that they don't need you that way anymore, you have the hard job of kind of redefining yourself as an individual when you didn't necessarily have to lose that, but not everybody has structures in place that allows them to have the kind of freedom where they can still, follow the things that they're interested in and do the kind of work they want to do or follow up with their hobbies or whatever. People who don't live near family, or when both parents have to work, or just, all of those things that are involved in that. So knowing that, and then letting the kids know as well that, yes, you are important, but so am I. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's okay for you to just play in your bedroom by yourself so mom can read a book or whatever, that allows them to have those healthy boundaries as well for other people, so that they don't constantly center themselves as they get older. They recognize that sometimes we choose to put our needs or our desires to the side for a little while so that we can care for the other people in our lives, or allow them to care for themselves.
100%. Well put. Better than my caffeine-induced rambling.
No, I totally, I was just beautiful. Like agreeing with you. So Olga's here with us today. Hello, gorgeous friend. And so is Tyler. Welcome, Tyler. It's been a while since we've seen you, my friend. Glad to have you back. Yes, and Crystal here as well. Hi, Crystal. So since it's just the two of us today, we're going to mostly have a relatively casual conversation, but there is a couple things I definitely want to talk about today. Because I just feel like the art community right now is in such an interesting place overall, with like jumps in technology and transitions that are happening, and like where we are deciding to place emphasis on technology versus human, like acquired skill and all of these different things, and what matters where. And I've seen already lots of groups removing AI from the potential tools that they will allow to be displayed. So if AI was included, they don't want that. Some that are embracing it and calling themselves AI artists, like the whole flow of that. And then just even other tools that are coming out. I know you recently got kind of hooked into a cool one. I've been dying to try, but I haven't done it yet because I just finished my last commission. But like, tell people what you found, or like what you got into and what you think of it so far.
Oh yeah, I mean, you could literally like pull it up on your phone. So it's an AI tool called Clip Drop, Relight, and it essentially lets you place like studio lighting, kind of. I mean, like pretty effective 3-dimensional lighting over a 2D image, which is something like, or that's like on my list of like, one day I'll make a tutorial of how to do this quickly in Photoshop. And by quickly, I mean, it still takes an hour. I just did it on my phone with a program. Like, what in the world? Like, so utterly cool. And I mean, I love that ability to take out that user error and to speed up my workflow if I can. And the fact that things are just coming out every single day is so exciting for me. Because I would much rather be able to do that using a program than have to go and like, I don't know, use camera projection onto like a 3D mesh and like light it that way and then take that back into Photoshop or some, you know, ridiculous bullshit to relight a picture. So yeah, that was pretty fun.
Yeah. I'm going to put that in the comments real quick so that people can check it out. It's called Clip Drop Relight. Yeah, you can put the link in there for folks. Yeah, and it's really interesting because essentially you can import a 2D image, something you've painted or a photo you've taken or whatever, and then place lights within the scene, and those lights will behave as if they're really in the scene. So light up the proper side of the face, even color, you multiple lights, like all kinds of stuff, right?
It's super impressive. Yeah, and I'm sure it'll only get better. Like it doesn't, obviously, like if your image has like very hard directional light, you know, very stark shadows and stuff, it's not going to work that well. Like I tried it just for fun on a couple things, and flat lighting worked very well. More hard light, like very contrasty light, not so much, but we'll get there. I imagine
probably super helpful for a lot of people whose process. So, and that's an interesting thing to talk about as well. But some people, their process is to begin painting from scratch with the light source in place. And you're going to choose highlight colors and shadow colors, and you actually paint them in from the beginning. And other folks will go in and they'll do their flats, and then they'll use a separate layer and they'll add their highlights and shadow later on. And I can't help but feel like folks who go flat from the beginning and then do that later are probably going to find this like way more helpful than people who paint their light in from the start.
Totally. And it allows you to move things around very easily too. And like, that's one thing I love about working off of a 3D base and doing a paint over 3D is that I can change it. I can, you know, test things out before I really commit. Because if I am just doing like strictly, like I've done this with photos a lot where I'll relight them in Photoshop by painting. And you know, it works, but it's time consuming. Once I've done it, like I'm committed. And
right.
redoing it again, I don't really want to do that. So in 3D, it's a lot easier. But then, of course, then with technology like this, like suddenly it becomes more accessible to a larger range of people, which is super cool.
Yeah. One of the interesting things that I heard somebody talk about, and I want to say that this was actually on the F-Stoppers YouTube channel. I think it was a conversation with Pi Jirsa, and they were talking about, you know, AI and the way that that is impacting how people are making art. And so I heard some of this was there, but another one I think was a random TikTok video, and I'll have to see if I can find that at some point and share it. But essentially what they said is, right now, a lot of the art that we consume en masse is controlled by big studios, huge investors who are very risk averse because they have to be, because they're spending hundreds of millions of dollars making a movie or making, you know, films or whatever. And they need to make sure that this is something that they're going to be able to earn their money back off of. And gone are the days of the DVD where if you didn't do super well in the theater, then at least you were selling physical products for a while. Like you may still have a shelf life of 2 years or something where you're still earning a good amount of money from that you can recoup the costs and then make your profit. Now that DVD really is not playing a role, that part of it, yes, it was Matt Damon who said this part that I'm mentioning. Now that part is not playing a role, investors are a lot more careful about where they're putting their money. And so they want some kind of guarantee that this is going to make a profit. The problem with that is we're getting much more safe films, things that are much more watered down in general. When AI gets to the place where it is accessible by regular folks, if you wanted to make your own version of something that was in the public sphere, like go make your own version of Pride and Prejudice using these AI systems that are going to allow you to create films. And now your vision of that is out there in the world without having to invest hundreds of millions of dollars. And all of a sudden, even though you may not have been the one who photographed every scene or painted every scene or whatever, the way you see it in your head is communicatable because you didn't have to spend 10 years or 10,000 hours mastering a thing. A program became an intermediary for you. And so there's going to be probably a lot more freedom of creation. We're going to be able to see things that are a lot more experimental. We're going to be able to see things that push the boundaries because we don't have some studio behind the scenes who needs to keep it safe. And, you know, the same is going to be true probably for other art forms as well. When that accessibility is there, it's going to give people the freedom back to make wild and crazy art where we don't have to kind of fit inside the box of what's profitable, I think. And I was like,
yeah,
I'm like that idea.
But I think that there's also like, I think that accessibility may plateau in a way. Like I definitely am very excited for the lowered costs of entry for a lot of artists. And you see this already. Like, this is one reason I love Blender so much. Like I've used other 3D software, you know, but I'm going to always love Blender because of, because it's free, but also because of the way the community has like kind of grown around that and how it fosters that desire to learn and to grow and to create things without needing to spend, you know, tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars on going to art school so you can have, you know, your key to access whatever software, and then, you know, having to spend thousands of dollars a year on that software. Like, it allows for that creativity from anyone. You're not stuck in this kind of like social hierarchy bullshit of, you know, can I afford to go to college? Can I afford these programs? No, then I have to change my dream. However, I think that what is going to be required of artists going forward with these emergent technologies is going to change. Like, if you think about learning photography, like when I started learning photography in like the late 90s, it never even occurred to me that I would be shooting on a digital SLR in a couple years. That was mind-blowing. And yes, it made photography more accessible to a lot of people. The emergence of smartphones made photography and like learning to see through a camera accessible to a lot of people. But what defined a really fantastic photographer still was harder to reach and still required a level of know-how and technical understanding, artistic vision, all these other things that needed to be pursued outside of just access to the tools. And so I imagine with things like AI, we're going to probably see a lot of that too, whether it is, you know, putting up paywalls to access programs like Midjourney or Stable Diffusion or anything uses already, but just the ability to use the tools very effectively and very well, I think is going to become more difficult in coming years. And it will take new skill sets that we can't even comprehend because they don't exist yet.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that's kind of what happens with every new advancement is all of a sudden, it seems to me like more and more what's happening is all of a sudden the way we think is becoming more important than our necessary technical skill set. Like, we don't have to, if you look back at, you know, the art that we have from 100 years ago, 500 years ago, whatever, somebody had to build that technical skill set for years and years and years and years, usually under a master who was the one going, no, it's no good yet. And they had to understand all of these technical aspects, from color palette and composition to like what the meaning of the symbolism that they were using for their time, all of those things, all the stuff. But the technique was the most important part, right? What we have as a holdover from those times isn't even necessarily the best. It's just what survived. And I think we forget that we look at a lot of historical paintings and historical works of art and we think, oh, these were the best things produced in that time. It's not necessarily true. These were just the things that lasted. And sometimes the things by people who were already the most famous. Like, if you were the court painter for the King of Spain, the chances that your work was going to last is pretty high. If you were some poor artist barely making a living and painting portraits for the merchant down the street, probably your stuff wasn't going to survive, even if you were the, you know, the better maybe artist in general. But it seems like as technique has become more accessible over time and tools exist to help us finesse technique without all of the additional effort that it would take to build it ourselves, what's happening is we're fine-tuning the way we think. And so all of a sudden, the art that gets made here and then expressed, this part of it becomes way more important than, can you chisel stone and make this look like a hand? Because of course that requires its own set of, you know, abilities, but now when you and I can both type something into a machine and have it output art, not only which of us is going to be thinking the thing and be able to express the thing that comes out that way, but how do you then finalize it? How do you choose what composition and color palette best matches the purpose of a thing, and who is going to be able to curate those things so that they actually are suited and not just here's a pretty mashup of junk. And probably as time goes by, the public's ability to sift through that kind of stuff is also going to begin to raise, because along with ubiquity comes facility, right? And so we're going to be seeing like they're going to start to notice a lot of the kind of bull crap, and it that requires the better artists to kind of be the cream that rises to the top. I think not just artists in like I can draw a box that looks like a real box, but artists in that the way that I think I can also see and then transfer, that vision into something that communicates properly.
Have you read the book Eat That Frog?
No.
Okay, so it's like kind of like a
but I'm Googleizing now.
Book. What?
I'm Googleizing now.
It's very popular, like, how to get stuff done and motivate yourself kind of book. I read it the other day. Kind of thought it was a little woo-woo bunch of crap that had a lot of words that didn't actually say anything. But the part that I kept out of it that stood out to me was to like write out a list of what are the top 3 most important things that you offer to your company that you can do in a day. And you can kind of bend that and change that to apply to yourself as artists, right? What are the top 3 things that need to be done every day or every week or whatever? Like, what are those things that are irreplaceable by automation, by machine? Or what are the things that, cannot be delegated out, and if they can be delegated out, then they're really not that special and you're not that good at what you do. So what are those top 3 things? And so I've been So I've been thinking about that. Like, what does that mean for, me as a working artist in my company that is myself? And it comes down to that thought process that you're talking about, right? Like, I can automate out even brush strokes to a computer, I guess. I can hire another photographer to shoot a concept that I've developed. I can hire a team, if I need to deck a set or something. Like, I don't have to physically be doing that part. The top 3 things that are going to be the most valuable and irreplaceable that make me have value to my clients are not those things. And I feel like just kind of an interesting thing to think about in general. Like, what if you took every single thing that you do in a day as a working artist and you have to refine it down to 3 necessary tasks? What are those tasks?
I love that question. And I think it actually illustrates something I find really interesting about the art community as it relates to like high-end stuff and then also commercial stuff. And I was thinking about this. So there's one photographer I really enjoy. Her name is Peggy Sirota. And I know I've mentioned her before, but she doesn't do her own lighting. She's actually said before in interviews, like, I'm not that good of a photographer. I don't know a lot about technique. I don't know a lot about lighting. Like, you could give me a camera and I'm not going to be able to dial in, what I need for the scene. I might just set it on aperture priority. Like, it's not as if she's a technician, right? But what she's really, really good at is people and relating to people and making people comfortable and, being able to get them to relax and to express themselves and all of that kind of stuff. And I used to have this problem when I was younger. So my dad was a mechanic, and you grow up when you live in a household, like a blue collar, like working class household like that, you always kind of think about the fact that here is your dad, for example, and he is working, 8 to 10 hour days, and he's working hard and he's injuring his body and he's doing these things, these valuable things, so people can drive to work and pick up their kids from school and all the important things that are related to a car. However, on the other side of that equation, here's somebody like a movie star or somebody else who's making like pretend money, like money that you can't even conceptualize what that means. And that seems so deeply unfair. And as I got older, I started to realize the kind of mechanistic quality behind why this is. And that's because my dad could work on one car at a time. A movie can be seen by 100 million people at once. Therefore, 100 million people giving you a small amount of money versus one person giving you $2,400 is 2 entirely different systems that you're building, right? And so somebody who is a CEO, they're not a CEO because they can make the product. They're a CEO because they can work people. They can get people to do things. They can ideate. They have a clear vision of things. Like there's certain qualities and aspects to being a CEO. We never really think about art in terms of being the CEO of the creation. So if I hire somebody to retouch something, I'm not just going to be like, go at it, have fun, do your thing, and then, and then give it to me and I'll figure something out. No, these are the things that I want. I want this kind of color palette. I want the skin to look this way. I want, et cetera, et cetera. Am I less of an artist because I have outsourced the technical aspect to somebody else, but the vision is still mine? And I'm still directing it in the same way that a conductor is directing a symphony. Or if I was to write a symphony and then direct it, I can't play it. I'm not a tuba player, but I can tell you how I want it because it lives here. And that same thing is true, like at the top level, the top earners in general are also the people who are the top thinkers and the people who are able to like translate what they hear into a cohesive vision and then bring a group of people together to be able to see that come to pass. Those are the folks who earn the big money. And then most of us who are making maybe a single commission for a person, we might make a pretty good commission on that, but we're never going to be able to work at scale the way those people are unless we build the kind of systems that allow us to work fast and be effective and translate vision quickly, and that's not possible when you're painting everything by hand. And so maybe we've elevated this idea of I did everything myself to the point that we're missing that there isn't necessarily anything more noble about that than there is about somebody who can direct the symphony. You know what I mean? I don't know if I'm making any sense here. I think I like rambled into
No, you are. And like I was kind of thinking about that too. I shared that article to the Facebook group about the photographer who hired another photographer to help her shoot this self-portrait.
Oh,
and
right.
And she submitted the image to a competition, and then she had her award revoked because the other photographer came forward and was like, hey, I took this picture. And she's like, okay, but I directed the whole thing. So who is in charge here, right? And you see this in film too, obviously. Like you have your directors, and everyone wants to go be a director because they get all the notoriety. But I feel like you don't see that in other art genres the way that you do in film. But who is that conductor? I mean, like if I were to ask you, Nicole, if you were to think of those top 3 things for yourself, would that directing be one of them, or would it be the hard work? Like, what would they be for you?
Yeah. So partly the directing. If I have a group of people that I need to pull together to make a thing, when it comes to the actual creation of the thing, like I'm getting my stylist, I'm getting my model, and I'm getting my makeup artist, and I have my whole team together, I get what I want. So like my ability to marshal people to an idea. And I think the enthusiasm is part of that. It's kind of hard to say no to somebody when they're really excited about what you're doing. And so having like something like that kind of enthusiasm that is contagious, and then being able to bring other people on board with that and get them excited about a thing that they want to participate in, I think that's definitely part of it. I probably the biggest is my ability to ideate and translate. Like my ability to take information and put it together into an idea and then conceptualize and translate that into an actual thing. I think that's the other probably big part of it, is that if you come to me with a problem, I'm going to think of probably 50 different solutions. I'll be able to talk that out with you and then come to, a final answer that you are happy to use. So, and then that ability to communicate with people, to make them feel comfortable, to know that we're going to work together to, find a solution to your problem, and that you're going to be happy with what's there at the end. And that I'm accessible, right? So I think those things are absolutely why my clients keep coming back. The ones that rehire me keep coming back because they know that they can trust me and they can trust the process, and they have input, and those things that you can't get, I think, from a machine are the parts that make it valuable. Because somebody can get, and we've talked about this before, right? Like there are photographers out there who are 1,000,000 times better than me, like 1,000,000 times better than me. And you can go hire them if you want to. But they don't think like I do, and they don't work like I do. And they don't have the same vision that I have. And so working me, like who I am, is always going to be at the heart of what I make, whether that's the books that I write or the art that I make or whatever else. And that isn't something that can be replicated, because the experiences in my life can't be replicated. Somebody else might have some of the same ones, but not in the same combination and not with the same effect, and et cetera, et cetera. So it's always, at the end of the day, I think, us that makes, like, it has to be the core, you know, like if you have three things, they're definitely coming from that core of it being you who's doing them and not somebody else.
I feel like the technician aspects could be in that list for our individuals.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, that list is going to be different for everybody. It might even be different every day. Like I've been, again, sitting on it and like thinking for myself, and I haven't fully defined, you know, every day, what are those three things going to be? Like, what are the three things that I can do that are going to better my business and better myself and better my art? And they change. And some days it is the directing, and other days, yeah, it is the technical output. And I think that variable is, or like the variability, I guess, is maybe also kind of essential. Like the ability to grow and to keep up and to change, I think is very essential. And like when we look at like people who are like really kind of like leading in innovation, right? Like what are the things that give them that ability to be innovative and to stay at kind of the forefront of their industries? And like often it is things like being on top of emergent technology like AI or whatever, or digital photography, like getting your foot in the door really fast. Or maybe they come from a lot of money and they're able to just back up whatever they want because they have capital to go and blow. And then, you know, people who are just really, really, really good. Like they're just really good at what they do. So how do each of us then choose that kind of path? Like what is going to be our road into individual greatness? Because I know for me, it's not going to have hundreds of thousands of dollars in capital to invest in marketing my business, because that's not where I'm at today. But I want to stay on top of technology, and I want to really just be good at what I do. So how do I define what exactly it is that I need to be perfectly good at? And how do I work at that every day?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I think, so some of the conversation that has been really interesting is people talking about kind of the history of automation and what happens to different, you know, sectors of the job market when automation steps into those places. And the thing is, when Henry Ford started assembly lines, and then when robots took over the jobs at assembly lines from people, of course, you still need people there for quality control, right? But that doesn't stop companies from making handmade vehicles. And those handmade vehicles sell for bazillions of dollars. But of course, like you said, that requires a lot of capital, that requires highly skilled technicians, and it requires people who are willing to push beyond the pale of what most folks are willing to do. And so, and we talked about before, like there's, you know, a decent level of skill, and then you have somebody who's really good, and then you have somebody who's extraordinary. And the difference between somebody who's decent and somebody who's really good is relatively wide. The difference between somebody who's really good and somebody who's extraordinary is this. Like, and you see this for the people who win the races, the fastest person in the world. They're not winning by 3 seconds. They're winning by tens or hundreds of seconds. The people who are climbing harder than anybody else, they're not climbing harder by 4 grades. They're climbing harder by, you know, you're going from a 512 to a 513 or a 514. Like these are decimal points that you're being better by. And unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, that increase in skill, where pure skill is the thing that's winning the day, is you fight for those millimeters. Like you claw and you scratch and you scream and you bleed for those millimeters, and it only changes you this much. But people are willing to do that. And those folks, like the ones who are willing, if it's technique or technical skill that you plan to use to get you to the very top, then you have to be willing to fight for those things. You have to be willing to do more than everybody else and do it longer and harder than everybody else in order to walk away with that skill. When for some folks who aren't willing to do that, it makes a whole lot more sense to make your money, even if you're in the same field, in a different way. Like maybe I'm not ever going to free solo like El Cap, right? But maybe instead I'm going to go take a whole bunch of people out and teach them to climb, and I'm still going to be climbing, and maybe I'm not doing that and getting notoriety that way, but I'm making a really good paycheck every day from the folks who want me to, guide their tours or whatever. You're still working in the same field, but the skill set that you're using is an entirely different one, because I know that I don't have the desire to fight for those millimeters the way that somebody like Alex Honnold might. So
that's
the battle over skill set is a rough one, because there's almost always somebody who's willing to work harder than you, or has more money that gives them more free time than you, or whatever. But the question is, like, what part of the market do you fall in? And then also, is that the battle that you want to be fighting for the rest of your life, to stay on top technique wise? And it's not for me at all. Technique
any outlet?
No. Nope.
Interesting.
None. No, because when you look at it from where we grew up, what we grew up with, right? Analog to digital, and the changes that have been made, the kids that are coming up behind us have access to infinitely more than what we had. And their ability, like the things that we had to fight for in the beginning, their ability to surpass that in a shorter amount of time because of what they understand and what they have access to is like infinite. However, that doesn't make them me. And I still think I am the secret sauce behind the things that I make, because of what I'm interested in and what drives me and what I'm passionate about and what turns me on. And there's always going to be somebody who will have surpassed me in technical skill. And if you look at the people who have gotten to the absolute pinnacle of their field in technique, they are often very tired. They are often like physically broken in many ways because of what it requires of you, the long hours and everything else it requires you, the stress on your body that it requires you. Artists who have carpal tunnel syndrome and tennis elbow and neck issues and all of this stuff, because it takes a long time to perfect the ability to do these things. Painters who have gotten cancer from the chemicals in their paint, like all of this stuff, to have these technical skills requires a sacrifice. Am I willing to sacrifice that to bank on my technical skills as the thing that'll put me in the top 1%? No.
But couldn't you, being the secret sauce, still be something that you can continue to claw those extra millimeters out of?
Sure, but I don't think of that as a technical skill. I think of
that
that
as technical skill.
Like,
I just mean like any goal.
Oh, I thought you meant like as far as technique goes. No, I mean, like, I'm going to keep fighting my whole life. Like I'm always going to be clawing my way to the things that I want. I guess it's just, what area am I willing to fight in, right? Like, is it going to be technique? No, because there's always going to be somebody who is going to be like gutting it out more than I can or more than I desire to. Somebody who's willing to sacrifice their relationship with their family, their spouse, their kids for more time to learn. I'm not that person. I value that. I value my free time. I value my sleep, like all of those things. But can I learn to be a better communicator? Can I learn to be more authentic? Can I learn to trust myself more, to communicate, like those things? Yeah, I think I can do that.
That's reminding me of I don't remember some like 3D environment tutorial or something I watched, and it starts with like an intro of the artist, and he's probably like 27 and already like senior artist at some game studio or whatever. But anyway, so
he's a baby.
And it's so weird, like now that I'm in my 30s, to like look at these younger people who like have accessibility to all these things and can learn so quickly and have so many more resources than like we did in our youth. And like I'm simultaneously excited for them and also like, what is happening? Existential dread. But there was one particular tutorial I watched, and the guy starts with like, I had to break up with my girlfriend. And, I stayed up all night till 2 a.m. every day for 6 months. And like, this is how I got my first job. And I didn't go out with my friends, and I didn't have a social life. And I, didn't do anything at all. And he did it. He like got the job at his dream studio and is now making expensive tutorials on the internet and working on awesome stuff. But it's also just like, damn, dude, what are you working for though? Like how, I don't know. Derailed to a tangent. Just that's what that reminded me of, is that sacrifice, right? And that's something I do have to remind myself of too, is like I need to pay attention to my family. I need to pay attention to my relationship. I need to stay above water as a business person. I have to stay above water mentally and like maintain my own mental health, maybe take a shower or something, and probably eat food in there somewhere. Like so many things to do to juggle and balance. And they aren't all differentiated. I mean, swinging back to the fact that like today is my first free day, right? Where I get to go and hit that flow state for like uninterrupted hours. And I have done more in like 2 hours than I have in like 3 weeks. So I think there are ways to, depending, you know, how you think and what you value and what you're willing to sacrifice and how you want to balance that for yourself. I think there's ways to kind of hit every marker if we go back and if we change the way we think, if we change the way that we direct ourselves. And so tools like the AI stuff we were talking about in the beginning, I mean, that's only going to kind of benefit us to be able to balance those things more, right? If we don't have to focus on menial things like slowly painting blue light on someone's nose for half an hour, you know, like that allows us that freedom to then go spend more time with our kids or with our boyfriend or, you know, whatever. And we can put that mental focus on bettering ourselves, on being that better communicator, that better director, that more creative person. And it's exciting to think that there's opportunities for that, but it's also really, really hard, like making the decisions on what to even prioritize in the first place. I don't know.
That's the hard one. Yeah. So Crystal's saying, was the sacrifice worth it? And I mean, like, that's the question, right? Like for that guy, if that's what he's living for, if he's like, there's not a relationship I have that's important enough to me to take away from this thing that I do that gives me purpose. I mean, what can you say to that, right? And for some people, that's the case. So I guess knowing yourself is a really important aspect of that.
Just putting it out there, though, like this is what you have to do to be successful, I found very toxic for a multitude of obvious reasons. But I mean, yeah, for some people it probably is worth it. And I was thinking of this. Have you read, there was a study out of Harvard Business School maybe a couple years ago or something on the impact of marriage and children on women's careers. And like, okay, so and these are women who graduated from Harvard Business School. I mean, these are smart, capable, powerful women with big goals. And what the study concluded was not that children would inherently have a negative effect on a woman's lifestyle, but that her choice in partner and the attitude of a partner, and again, this is very gendered and speaking specifically, you know, they're focusing on women here, but one's choice in partner changed their outcome, the outcome of their career, more than the impact of having to take care of children or having to, you know, change your life in that way. It was purely based on the relationship and the expectations of the relationship. And I found that so utterly fascinating looking back at my own failed first marriage. Like, oh, wow. Yeah. That was it. When you don't have necessarily the support of a partner or someone like that, or if you have a partner, but they're not supportive of your decisions and they prioritize their own, that's going to negatively impact where you put that focus, what you choose to sacrifice or not, because we are social creatures and we depend on those relationships to sustain us. So maybe choices like mystery tutorial guy breaking up with his girlfriend, maybe the girlfriend wasn't into it. Maybe that really was the right sacrifice. Maybe he gets another one someday who understands his career and they can balance each other out and it's an equal trade-off. But I thought that was profoundly interesting that it was the husband, not the children.
Yeah. Well, I think being social creatures and having that support and knowing that you're safe and all of those things give you the ability to chase the things that you want because you're out of that survival mode, right? And that's one of the things that I think sometimes we fail to talk about is often just the ability or the privilege that it requires to spend the time that it takes to build the skill sets. Like if we were to look at art, and just talk about the fact that, okay, 10,000 hours, right? 10,000 hours that you have to become a master of your techniques and your skills. What did you have to spend to get those 10,000 hours? Did you have a supportive spouse who was like, yeah, you know what? I got this. Go do your thing. That is an incredible privilege, right? Like that's a huge privilege. I absolutely have. And of course, we could fight over the idea of like what makes something a privilege. My husband and I spent a long time poor and we spent a long time apart and we made a lot of sacrifices in order to be where we're at today. However, like we don't require both of us working to survive. And so that is definitely a privilege. we made a lot of sacrifices to get there, but still the fact that we're there now, there are folks who it requires everything they have just to feed themselves. They're not going to be able to go and just put the time in aside from what they're doing to build up all these skills to chase their dreams. And when I graduated from high school, I didn't even really know the options that I had to get myself through college. I got accepted to a college I wanted to go through. I got a scholarship, but that wasn't even going to cover 25% of the cost it was going to take to go there. So to me, the option was like, I can't work myself through, like, I don't even earn enough in order to pay for tuition. So I have to figure out something else. So that was one of the reasons that I joined the military. But like, for a lot of folks, I wasn't able to start picking art back up seriously until my kids were, until my youngest one was about 2 years old, I would say. I wasn't even able to start doing that stuff. So like, a lot of the people who are making these huge improvements, we forget about the fact that the privilege of time and even just the privilege of time, removing money from the equation, the privilege of time is a huge one. And some of these programs are going to give that back to a lot of people who maybe have really creative minds and don't have 10,000 hours to put into learning this skill set. And so this is going to be the tool that they need in order to express themselves or to take what's in here and put that out into the world. And while I absolutely know that is going to, like any advances that we have in any field, that is going to cut into profits in some places, that is going to cut into certain fields, that is going to shave the edges off of a lot of things. But I think when you mentioned earlier that kind of plasticity of mind and way of thinking and ability to adapt, I mean, I think if we don't have that, that's something we can have that allows us to stay relevant,
I mean, it applies to anything, right? Like not even just art or whatever industry, but like being adaptable is how we survive. I mean, that's pretty high up there on the how humans have even made it this far, right? We've been able to adapt, and we regularly prove that. Anytime we go through any sort of hardship, you go through a breakup, you lose your job, have to move across the country, whatever it is, you find ways, often subconsciously, like if you're not actively thinking about it, to be adaptable, to be able to survive. And applying that with intent to our art, I think, is super valuable. And maybe if the technical parts are really important, because for a lot of people they are, and the technique and the medium and everything is integral to the eventual art piece, and that doesn't have to go away. It just maintains a different form of value. It sits differently on that top 3 list, right?
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's a decision many of us are going to have to make is how am I going to communicate the value of what I do? And for folks who they're like, the fact that this is analog is what makes it important to me. The feeling of running a paintbrush across a canvas, the ability to work with paints, like the tactile feeling of doing what I do, that's what makes this worthwhile for me. And so being able to communicate that to your potential customers is going to be part of your value proposition. Like for a lot of folks in the commercial world, it's, can you do it well and can you do it fast, right? And like time is of the essence there. And so for those of us who have worked in those spaces, we probably have a much kind of different feeling about these kinds of tools than folks who are like, the fact that I made this with my hands is why people spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on it. And I'm like, well, the fact that I can do 50 things in 3 hours, like that's what makes me valuable. And so you're right. We have to figure out what that kind of central, and if it's 3 or if like it's 1, but it has tripod legs or whatever it is, like the fact that we need to know what that is so that we can communicate it. And I still think that there will be a renaissance. I think that there's going to be a lot of folks who are like, I made everything in this with my own hands, and somebody's going to go, yeah, that's why I want it.
Yeah. I'm laughing. Olga sent me a video. Actually, a couple people have sent me this video now on TikTok about it's I think an art student who is like, you see all this cool concept art, these people don't even make this stuff, they're using pre-made assets in Unreal Engine. And I love that multiple people have sent that to me because it made me laugh. But I mean, it really just kind of illustrates so to speak, that difference in priority and what really is important. I don't feel like that anyone, myself included, who uses those tools that are available to make art is less of an artist. And you see this already in like Photoshop art, composite art. Like I've definitely had this discussion with people where they're like, you're not a real artist, you just copy and pasted. Like, okay, well, can you make this?
Right.
Did you make this? Did someone give you money to make this? Then you can shut up, because I'm going to go keep doing that while you complain, because it doesn't actually affect me at all. But it is that the necessity for speed, especially in large scale, like commercial production, like you need to be fast, and the getting ideas out quickly is the job. That's what you are paid to do. And whatever you need to do to make that happen while still being inspired, while still being unique, while still being creative is more important than whether or not you know how to illustrate or paint well. And we're kind of locked within our own individual bubbles of what our experiences are within the world of art. We only see what we're exposed to or what we know, and we don't understand other industries. And like when we're introduced to them, it's like, whoa, and it's either mind blowing and exciting because it's like, wow, I didn't know that was an option, or it's like, oh no, what the hell? But again, that exposure, I think, opens our minds. And when we see, like, we want to be innovative, if we want to be adaptable, we need that exposure to other things, to new things that we wouldn't otherwise do. And that's what's going to challenge us creatively, I think. And, not necessarily creatively as artists, but creatively as thinker, in order to come to new conclusions about how we better our own process.
Yeah, I love that. And I think you're right. Number one, like having that exposure to other fields or other parts of your field and the way that people work in those disciplines, but also remembering that there is no wrong way to do art. And if you value, and I know we've talked about this before, if you value the technique and if that is what is important to you, that's freaking awesome. If that's why you do art and that's what allows you to do art, chef's kiss, like take that and run with it. I think we just have to remember that that's, the most important thing is having a value proposition that clients agree with and we agree with and we understand it. And that's what we both find value in. Because like you have some folks who are selling, $12 prints of something that they drew and they're selling it to 500 people. And then you have one guy who's doing a photorealistic drawing that is 4 feet by 6 feet. And it took him 2,500 hours. And at the end of the day, he's going to sell it for $500,000 or whatever. And maybe in that amount of time, the person sold enough prints that they're making that much as well. And like, because one person decided to approach it from the aspect of like, look at me putting in every hair by hand with this pencil. And somebody else said, I sketched this on my computer and I sold it to 1,500 people for $5 a piece. Neither one of those are wrong. It's just a question of how you want to work. And I think when this comes back to, the question of the art, if I get what I want, I'm not super picky about how it got there. Like if at the end of the day, I'm happy with what I see, that's the main thing for me when I'm purchasing art. And there's a couple artists that I have hired several times because I just really love their style. The way that they put lines and colors together, I'm like, yes, it speaks to something in my soul. And so I will continue to hire those people because of what they can do and the way that it makes me feel. And there are even certain artists who they have some things that they sell in mass, like maybe little resin figures or something off a sculpture that they've done. But I want something made with your own hands. And so while other people buy those, I'm like desperately waiting for the other stuff that I can get my hands on, because the fact that it was made by you is what I want. Like that's what I want to have. So we can still even have the same person and value multiple things in different ways. Maybe you have tiers and you say, I'm using partial AI and something on this tier because it only takes me this long and it'll cost you $15, but I'm doing everything by hand on this tier and that's going to cost you $2,500 because it took me 4 days to paint it. So I think there's still room for both, probably even sometimes within an individual, right? Like within one person and and artists already do this. Like if you want a grayscale head of your character, it'll cost you $60. If you want a full color render of your entire character in their costume and whatever, it's going to cost you $350. So like artists are even already doing this in some ways. it's just, like I said, I think it's all about value, all about why you want to do what you want to do, and understanding your customers and what they value and what you do, and making sure that those things are aligned. Because if what you value is my great creativity and what I value is my speed, eventually those are going to clash somewhere. And if we don't know that, then we're going to hit a wall and go, why isn't anybody buying from me anymore? Look at this. Look at that. This is my frog.
The great struggle. The great struggle. Yeah, I've definitely been thinking on that value a lot lately, just personally. And so I have been victim to the death of Instagram, which I know I've lamented before, like over the last couple of months. And it's been very frustrating. Frustrated with myself at putting so many eggs in the singular basket, which, you know, don't do that. Anyone listening to me, don't be like me. But then focusing, you know, where is that value? And how do I communicate that to people? Because there are tons of people, and this is interesting to me too, is that there's so many people who do not rely on technology in the way that a lot of freelancers like myself do. And they still manage to have very successful careers and have a lot of people who love their art, but they are not reliant on social media or on a website. They manage to get themselves out there otherwise. And so I've been thinking a lot about that. Like, what does that value? Where is their value? What makes them stand out? And what allows them to find those people, regardless of, you know, our current technology addicted state of being? And, you know, where are they putting that time and that effort? And I feel like a lot of it does go into those, you know, focusing on whether it's a technical skill or whatever, but that deep love of what they value about creating their art. And that's going to stand out because of the effort that they put forward, instead of having to flaunt what they're doing or not doing, or their opinions or whatever on the internet. And so that's something what I've been sitting with recently on, like, how do I restructure now that I have the time to do so? And how do I get that value across to clients effectively, but still navigate things like people arguing about AI and how things are made? You know, like, where do I want to be in those conversations?
Yeah.
That makes my art still valuable, and still valuable to me, not just to potential clients. And where's the balance? I don't know. Did that make sense?
Yes.
You ever wonder about these things? Like, why do I matter?
Yeah, no, I do. And we've had these conversations a lot, and it's been interesting, I think, at least for me, over the past probably year or so, since I decided to make the career switch to relying mostly on publishing. And I have not been able to get there yet. It's still art that's carrying the day for me. And I'm never going to say goodbye to art. Like, I'm always going to be making things, whether it's for me or other people or whatever. And right now, commissions are literally paying for making my books. Like the hard costs that go into writing a book and publishing a book. However, I'm watching folks who started later than me with less experience than I have blow up and make $100,000 within a year. And there's the part of me that's like, that is so amazing. Like, well done, you. And then there's the other part of me that's like, what is wrong with me that I cannot get there? And it's difficult to find that balance in thinking, right? Where you can see those successes of other people purely as something that's aspirational and not as a kind of rebuke to you for whatever it is that you're not doing. And that part of it has been hard. And it's required me to ask myself, when I'm trying to sell books, how am I going about this? Because I'm testing a lot of things right now, from like Amazon ads to Facebook ads. Of course, like I have a TikTok, like most authors do right now. I don't do Twitter because that entire thing just pisses me off in general. There's the amount of like negativity and bullying that goes on Twitter just makes me want to run for the hills. But I'm looking at those things and I'm asking myself that question, like, who am I and what is it that I want to communicate? Because I'm seeing some authors, they have a page, you never see their faces. They're just sharing pictures of their book and quotes from their book and like images that, you know, give the mood and the feeling of their book and all of that kind of stuff. And they're selling books like mad. And then I'm seeing other authors who start out as kind of personalities, and people are following them because they like this person and they find them interesting and they like the same kinds of things. And then when they write the book, their audience is like, yay, we've been waiting for this. And they sell a whole bunch of books. So there doesn't seem to be any proper way to go off and make a career of it in either case. It's more a question of, do you believe in what you're doing there? And can you communicate that in a way that makes people interested and invested? And so who am I and who do I want to be? Do I want to go be a personality that people are like, I like this person, I like what they have to say, I'm along for the ride, and then I put out a product and they go, ooh, me as well, I want that. Or do I want to remove myself from the equation and allow the book to try to sell itself as if I didn't exist? And people do both and they're successful in both. How do I pick? I don't know. Like,
well, here's a question.
Yeah.
What do you spend more time on? Your writing or your communicating?
Oh, the writing. The communicating, like that part of it is a battle for me. So like when I see folks who are sharing like several TikTok things a day or whatever, and TikTok does sell books for me, which is great. Not as many as I could hope, because I had a viral video that was a crafting video, and that told TikTok, oh, this is a crafting page. So like HGTV Home started following me because they're like, we do crafting too. And I'm like, this is, I made a mistake here. So getting like authors and readers and people to come to my page has been really difficult, but trying to go like, I could make a video of that. Like that, it does not come naturally to me. I have to purposefully sit down and like work my way through that. Whereas other people are doing it multiple times a day, and it just seems like they fell really naturally into the rhythm of using it that way. That is not easy for me. I have to sit and plan and do the work of making it instead of like, yay, I get to do it. I would much rather be writing. I would much rather be making art. I would like to do things like this, this I enjoy. So if I could pay somebody to sell my books for me, I would. But in order to get to a place where I can do that, I have to do these things.
But like, what if you didn't?
What if somebody just gave me lots of monies for advertising?
Well, I mean, that would be great. No, like what? Because this is what I'm thinking about right now. Just again, like from my own, like my life is changing this week. What am I going to change about myself, or else I stay the same? Like I turned off all my notifications on my phone.
Yeah.
And it's like set up right now where it literally locks me out of the apps that I waste my life on. And and if I do open them after going through a bunch of button pushing, it force closes them after 5 minutes. And like what if you just didn't TikTok? Like what if you put all the time that you worry about creating the videos or something? I'm not saying that this is right. I'm just into the writing or the art. And I wonder what effect that would have. Because I'm wondering that too, like for my own chaos. Like, what if I put that time that I otherwise would be commenting or reading my email or, making a video after I spend 3 hours editing something down to 15 seconds. What if I put that effort and that time somewhere else? And would that benefit me better? Would it benefit you better?
It's a valid question. So I can say from my history, if you were to look back over the amount of books that I've sold since the first book was published and then on to now, when I started saying, okay, marketing is important, I need to take this seriously if I'm going to be a successful author, meaning I earn enough money to help support my family. And hopefully even more than that, because let's be real, I want the monies, right? So once I start taking that seriously, I went from selling no books a month to making money. And maybe it's not a lot. Like if I make $100, I'm like, ooh,
that's still making money.
That's the start, right? Like you don't start off, you don't just, well, I don't anyway. Some people probably do, but you don't start off like making thousands of dollars a month. You start off in the poo and then you claw your way to the top. Unless you have lots of money. But that aside, the difference between when I'm not doing any marketing and when I'm marketing is selling versus not selling. I'm always making art, so that never actually changed. All that changed is are people buying it. And I think, to be fair, it's particularly difficult within publishing because there are a lot of really great books to choose from, and books don't go away in the way that sometimes art styles shift. So like not many of us are buying like flower power, graphic art from the 60s anymore. We're buying things that have shifted in the art styles, but we're still reading like 1984 and Slaughterhouse-Five. We're still reading those books. We're still reading Pride and Prejudice, right? So like those things have a longer lifespan, which means I'm still competing with Jane Austen. If somebody wants to read, right? Like if somebody wants to read a Regency romance, like I'm still competing with her to sell that book, competing for the attention of potential readers. So the amount is huge. And then what you earn is very, very small. Like I make sometimes $2.50 to $3+ a book. That's like the limit of what I can earn per book. So if I want to make any kind of living, I have to sell many, many books per month, which means the only way to do that is to get the attention of many, many people. And publishing houses do this by having their fingers in every fucking pie and, sending people on book tours and doing book blogs and doing, end cap advertising at Barnes and Noble, just all of the things that they do. Unless I want to spend, I could remove myself from TikTok and take every extra dollar I earn and put that into Facebook ads. But I have not mastered Facebook ads yet. Right now, they only lose money for me. So I have to learn enough about the marketing. As soon as I make enough, though, somebody else is doing that job. I will retreat into my hobbit hole and like show up to wave my little monkey hat around and then just make art the rest of the time. So Olga's saying, I think just focusing on art only really works when you have outside advocates marketing your thing. And for me, that has been my experience, but it may not. Like some people have worked their marketing out in such a way where their work is their marketing. So like Mitch Liu, I'm never going to pronounce his name right, but wonderful like cartoon style illustrator. And what he does is essentially films himself drawing small things. It only takes a few minutes. And then he's like, if you want to learn more, like you can go here. And that's just probably part of his normal process of like, here's what you do. That's a little bit difficult with writing because somebody might just see me being like this. It's not really going to be super interesting for somebody to watch. But I think if there are parts of process that we can do, but even then those, like when you're doing a piece and you do a speed, like a speed edit of your piece, it still requires editing and music and all, it has all of its own junk. However, places like TikTok are moving towards live streaming. Twitch has been doing that. And maybe that's a great option for folks who don't want to have to separate their marketing from their work. Okay. If you pay me for that, I will do it. I'll just sit there being like,
I got $5. I mean, that's kind of where I've been at too. And I record everything. Whether or not I'm motivated to spend the time editing it is another question. But live streaming, I feel like there is kind of this natural communication. But I don't know. It's like the amount of time spent on, like the time and the brain power spent on the prep and the communication. I'm wondering how much is worth it or how it can be simplified to something like live streaming. I don't know.
I know artists are doing it on Twitch. A couple friends have a specific day. So they, Tyler and Ray, they do live brush. So they paint, they do oil paintings live from their set.
I'm sub to them on Twitch.
Yeah. So like they're doing their thing. There were a couple artists, even a couple of photographers who they were shooting live or editing live. And one of the big things now, TikTok has always done it, but they're pushing now for these live streams because they want to keep people on the platform as long as possible. And if you can keep people engaged, then, then that's a big deal. So that's a thing to think about is what platforms already exist that the way that they're built works for what you want to do. And if you have to do an entirely separate production in order to make it work, that's really frustrating. And so that's definitely a thing I'm thinking about because it just adds more shit to your day that you have to do.
I want less shit.
I want
less shit for everyone.
Less shit in my life in general. I feel you. Oh, this was a fun conversation. So much good stuff. Okay, so I know we're at the end of the hour and we've only had a couple people with us today. A lot of our audience that are part of the kind of crossover from us to Portrait Masters are down there in Arizona, getting their photography on and learning cool stuff and having fun with each other. I saw already some of our Artist Forge family getting to meet for the first time in Arizona, which is really great. I know, I'm so happy. Olga saying, I'm the only one that matters. This is true. We exist for her glory. So wish that they were here with us today, but so glad for everybody who came in and stopped by, especially Olga. Crystal, and I know earlier with us, Tyler was here as well. So just really, really grateful for everybody who came by. Remember, we're going to be together on Mondays like this and trying to do more actual live streaming in our group where we're just editing or chatting or whatever. So we hope that you will join us in the Artist Forge Facebook group. Remember, it is a private group for the safety of our members, and you have to answer a few questions to get in there. But we encourage you to do that and come hang out with us there, where we're learning to think like artists, learning to think better all the time. That's part of the purpose. So come hang out with us there, have these cool conversations, show off your art. And of course, you can always check out theartistforge.com where there are podcasts and blog posts and all kinds of interesting things to get into, even an ebook about the artist mindset around money. So that might be something of interest. I hope you go check that out. Until then, have a really incredible rest of your week. Go make amazing things and come hang out with us again next Monday, either here on YouTube or on Facebook. Have a great week, everybody. Bye.